Right. We got water. Right. We got water.
Right. Single multiple car. I like it. Let's say it's Thursday. Oh, maybe.
I welcome everybody out to our regulars board meeting for Arlington Public Schools. We're so glad you've all joined us. We'll call this meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. The next item on our agenda will be our roll call attendance. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? Director Ray? absent at this time, right? Like, he will be joining us on Zoom. Director Kelly? Here. Director Kingman?
Here.
President Levesque? Present. Director Knapp? Here. Student Advisor Decoder?
Here.
Student Advisor Levon? Here. Superintendent Weaver? Here. Thank you. Next up, we'll have our approval of the agenda. Is there any amendment to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve it as presented? Make a motion to approve the agenda.
A second.
It's a move and seconded to approve the agenda. Madam Clerk. Director Ray. Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp. Aye. The agenda is now adopted. The next item on our agenda is our presentation portion of our meeting. And we get to hear from a lot of different people. And Dr. Sweeting, will you please take it away?
I'm on the case.
So good evening. So January is proclaimed to be School Board Recognition Month. And so we have some special acknowledgements tonight for our board, who we greatly appreciate. And so the board consists of, as we know, elected officials, and then we have selected individuals that are on our board, our student advisors. So we're very grateful to each one of you. So first, we're going to read a proclamation from the governor about this month. So I'd like to invite Alan to come on up. Okay. You ready? Whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to ensure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible members of a democratic society and enjoy productive and satisfying lives. And
whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards of directors and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of the public education governance system in our state, serve more than 1.1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $15 billion, and employ approximately 120,000 people. And
whereas school boards play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And
whereas school board directors are directly accountable to residents in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And
whereas school boards and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And
whereas it is appropriate to recognize school board directors as outstanding public servants and champions for public education.
now therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2023 as School Board Recognition Month in Washington. And I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Thank you. So next, we have a special presentation, and this presentation is really, it's really here because of Julie Mann, a teacher at Arlington High School, and her leadership students. So we're going to watch a video and enjoy this special presentation.
We appreciate all that you do for our school district. We just wanted to say thank you.
So anyway, it was great that the students could get involved, and thank you. So next, I'd like to invite Executive Director of Operations, Brian Lewis, up. He is going to share some information before we have some special gifts for you.
I'm going to be joined by Carrie Henderson Burke.
And also Gary's League was going to have some things to pass around as well.
Sure.
That didn't just happen.
It did. My screens are gone. Is it just starting? It's fine. I just can't.
We're presenting to you gifts of appreciation, works from Kurt Tate, local artist, and hope you can't see my screen.
We have a power issue.
Very quiet.
Okay, there we go. We're sharing tonight with you, work of art from Kurt Tate, a local artist, has a studio in the Bryant area. Kurt has 40 years of experience creating used glass for international galleries. And we are so grateful to have few of his works of art, besides the ones just presented at the Burns Performing Arts Center. You can see on the screen, there's the chandelier that hangs in the entryway, the foyer of the Burns Performing Arts Center. It's really stunning to see it lit up. I encourage you to take note of it next time you go to the Burns Performing Arts Center. And then there's also glass work honoring donors to the construction of the facility in 2005. And so again, we're grateful to have these works of art. Glass fusing is a wonderful analogy for the governance work of the board. Like glass fusion, the board's work is often performed at high temperatures and produces, in the form of our students and graduates, unique works of art. Please accept this gift and appreciation for your work on behalf of the Arlington team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next, we also, sorry, you're gonna. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. We'll let you open it.
You need scissors for
The word. But while you're doing that, be thinking about this, we have some wonderful students who make delicious desserts and meals and all sorts of things. So we have students from Arlington High School Culinary Arts Club, and you have their teacher, and I don't know if she's here, Terry's here, or
No.
Terry Bravo Mejia. They prepared some wonderful desserts for us. Our students have done that. And so in a moment, we'll take a brief recess, if you don't mind, President Levesque, and enjoy the dessert.
And all that right then.
And did you, let's see, did someone want to show theirs?
Beautiful.
They are now
Different, maybe.
We appreciate it.
All right, sport, we are welcome to recess for a moment and grab a goodie. And then- do we need a motion to recess? Sure.
I make a motion to recess.
I'll take it. Then we will just take a brief recess.
Got it steady. The keys, Washington room, the breaker, monitors.
Or the owl.
Or the owl. Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded to take a brief recess Are we gonna leave it alone?
Sure. Director Kelly. Hi. Director Kingman. President Levesque. Hi. Director Knapp.
All right, we will be right in the hallway and have a little treat and everybody come and join us. Either stop charging. So I think it's not.
Yeah, I don't have the owl has no power.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
My monitors again. I think the power, I think a breaker. popped.
See what?
I think a breaker.
Oh.
That's what I heard. It's what I think happened.
She's like, oh, you hear her.
I put that up, but they're not gonna have any sound. And they're not gonna have any piano. Because like when I try and, well, now I can't even pull it up because like what here, when I try and choose the owl. It's,
So we're getting. No.
there's no owl.
What's that, sir?
There's no owl to choose, so.
What's that?
Oh, what did I do? I don't know what I just did. Oh. Where do I go back? Can't see anything else as we go.
You're able to still share in this.
I'm trying to get it back up. Here, okay, I like have everything. I can't even get the PowerPoint to come up. Why can I not get the PowerPoint to share?
Time.
I think we're good now.
We know.
Okay.
Now that we have.
Okay.
I should bring those back. There you go.
Yeah.
Eyes are- that's a good-
Eyes are glowing.
That's right. It's good.
They're like.
She still has Zoom.
So they just-
Once it boots, then you're good.
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead and see if you can rejoin it.
Now the lights are off.
Yeah, there's no
There you
hour.
go.
Oh, I heard it.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll go ahead and adjourn our recess and rejoin our meeting, and hopefully the owl is working well. Thank you for that wonderful presentation and the delicious treat. They're very appreciated. Next on our agenda will be our approval of our minutes, and we have one set of minutes from January 9th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Make a motion to approve the minutes from January 9th. A second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minute as presented. Director Kelly? Aye. Director Kingman?
Aye.
President Levesque? Aye. Director Now? Aye. Minutes are now adopted. The next thing we have on our agenda is our public comment portion. Are you aware of anybody waiting to join us on Zoom to speak? No. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? All right, we'll move on to our next item of business, and that is our consent agenda. The consent agenda includes our budget and enrollment reports, our personnel report, warrants, out of state overnight field trip for AHS journalism, and out of state overnight field trip for the AHS Light Jazz Choir, and a staff out of state travel. Is there any items from the consent agenda that anyone would like to pull? Or can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Madam Clerk. Director Kelly?
Aye.
Director Kingman?
Aye.
President Levesque? Aye. Director Knapp? Aye. The consent agenda is approved. Next up, we have our new business. And that's the first thing on the agenda for new business is our preschool inclusion champions grant. This will be presented by Dave McKellar, our Director of Special Education.
Well, I'm gonna get onto Gina's email here. No. Good evening, Dave McKellar, Director of Special Education. I'm actually gonna have Brenda Booth come up, our Director of Literacy and Learning Support. This year, we've launched our preschool inclusionary champions work with the ESD 189 with the support of OSPI. Brenda's going to tell you a little bit about what that work is. She's leading the work. Early literacy is her early learning, and literacy is her forte. And so, and if you didn't know, Brenda joined the special ed department as a 0.5 half-time director, and the other half is in teaching and learning. So this is part of where she's shining through for special ed on our side. So I'll turn it over to Brenda.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening. Okay, so tonight, yes, I'm here to talk about our grant that we have with the Preschool Inclusion Champions. And what this is really a statewide consortium of districts that are doing work towards providing quality, inclusive, early learning opportunities and looking at it in a lot of different models. Like currently, right now, what we have in Arlington is we have our developmental preschool, which is housed at President's, and it has all students in that program are on an IEP. And then we also house an ECAP program over at Silly Valley campus, and all those students are not on IEPs. And so the goal really, as we know, is inclusive education is beneficial for all students. You'll have higher academics, higher problem solving skills, stronger relationships, and a stronger sense of belonging when we include all students. And so the goal is to look at how we can do that within our current context, and also learning from around the state. Like there's other districts that are in this consortium who have been working on it for a couple of years, and they've created different models. And so monthly I'm on meetings with them and learning how different districts have approached this work. Our work for this year with the first year is to develop a lead team, which we're kind of getting started with our developmental kindergarten teachers, and also the director at the ECAP, Carrie Saunders, coming together and talking about our early learning and our community and what our community needs. We're also looking to pull in a parent or two, SLP, like OT, just people who provide services to our students. We also will be doing a lot of learning. So we'll do trainings from OSPI on early learning environment. And it also includes UDL in early learning. It's trauma informed and also promotes equity. Also, we just got invited on an opportunity to do a site visit down at the Edmund Pratt Early Learning Center, which is in Shoreline, and it's a UW demonstration site. There's a few of them around the state, as I said, some places that were early on in this work, and we get to go and learn from them. And that's kind of what the learning this year, it's a lot of learning and just kind of getting established and identifying needs and priorities. Any questions?
Yeah, Brenda, one question I had is, I'm wondering about funding. It seems like ECAP and then developmental kindergarten would be funded from different sources. How does that work for this? If you're trying to like coalesce that, even if there are different sites, you want it to be under an umbrella, what does that look like?
That's kind of part of what we'll be learning, but there are places that have taken these programs and like kind of break the funding, or you take a little bit of spots. Also, another way is to open up our development preschool for typically developing peers who are out in our community to possibly come in. There's a lot of different possibilities. We're just at the ground level trying to see what makes sense for our district.
And do we only offer ECAP?
Yeah.
That's the only location we offer that.
Yeah.
And how are we doing with, is it getting filled, or are we at capacity?
Yes.
Okay, and what is capacity right now?
That's more under Carl's bucket.
Oh, okay.
I want to say right in the upper 80s.
Yeah.
80 children.
Is that like 4
Yeah.
classrooms?
6 sections, 3 morning, 3 afternoon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's incredible. And really, as we bring the lead team together, they've already started talking about, it might be a ways down the road before we can actually really bring inclusion, because it takes some intentional work, but how we can already start to collaborate. Like ECAP has within their system a lot of like parent education or family nights, and talking about how can our developmental preschool students and families start to join that. So really starting to even just get some inclusive opportunities going for families. in our community.
I think if you get buy-in early, that's a big key too.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Any other questions?
Is there any conversation happening about increasing our preschool offerings? Are you guys talking about maybe possibly in the future, like big dreams of like an early learning center where all kinds of people at every economic level and every developmental level are all welcome and able, because that would be amazing.
It would be amazing. That's kind of our pie in the sky, like our end goal of what we'd love to see, and just being honest about some of the barriers within that of like space, because but districts have done it, districts have done it. So that's where really wanting to reach out to these partners and say, how did you do it? Where did you find the funding? Where did you find the space? That kind of stuff. So
I get a little jealous when I drive past other school districts that have figured it out. I'm like, wow, that would be lovely.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And then a part of this too, with the PIC, is kind of shortened to PIC group. It's also
expanded to what's called transitional kindergarten. So we're starting to have conversations around that as well. It's kind of like a kindergarten experience prior to kindergarten for, so just really statewide increasing the early learning opportunities before students enter kindergarten.
And about the transitional kindergarten, excuse me, would you be able to count them as students then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of.
Because as a kindergarten teacher, I have a few kiddos that are young. And I think, oh, if there had been an opportunity for them to have had that like segue into that environment, and then when they come in more ready because of maturity, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think teachers would like that as much as the parents who might think their child is more ready than maybe they actually are in some ways. And I think that would be I think that would fit a niche for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Do any of our student advisors have any questions about preschool? I know you're so far away from it.
It's really fun to visit if you get a chance. They're sweet, adorable.
I don't think I have any questions. I think my only thing would be, is there an option for, I don't know how to word it, like a virtual option if some students can't make it to the in-person and parents still want them to be included in that preschool and early learning? Would there be a virtual option?
There hasn't really been conversation around that. I think with COVID, what we learned is that age really doesn't, it's really difficult for them to attend and engage.
Right.
But nothing's off the table in our conversations.
Mhm.
No questions here.
I think to bounce off of Mariska's question is, what are the options for preschoolers that are perhaps medically fragile or things like that in our area?
Yeah, so on right now in our developmental preschool, we do have a few students that are medically fragile. So we have students who have multiple disabilities or in wheelchairs, some things, and they work with them in our preschool, kind of as though they would in our life skills program. But the goal is that, like, when we have life skills at Pioneer, those students are able to get out into the typical peers as is appropriate. We want that same experience for our preschoolers. We also, there's birth to 3 options and stuff in-home things if they were that at a level where they couldn't come to the clinic. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. If there's no other questions, this is an action item. We have a motion to approve the preschool inclusion champion grant.
Make a motion, we approve the preschool inclusion champions.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the preschool inclusion grant. Director Kelly?
Aye.
Director Kingman?
Aye.
President Levesque? Aye. Director Knapp?
Aye.
Next up on the agenda is our annual program compliance reports, and this will be presented by Dr. Sweet.
So policy 2106 requires that I ensure to the board that we are program compliance in certain areas. And I believe Brenda, she's going to pull it up, it is in the board packet. Basically, the program compliance is driven by our policies and procedures. So what you have here is there's A through L, and each one of those areas according to RCW that need to be in compliance, we do that through our policies and our procedures. So for example, the first policy that's listed is 1310, and all that describes is we use that mechanism for compliance with program requirements. The letter A is appropriate measures are taken to safeguard all students in school district permanent records against loss and damage. So we have a policy and a procedure to guard those practices, or to guard this process there. The next B is for instructional practice, the supervision. So that's evaluation of staff. We have Danielson for our instructional staff. We have WSP tool that we use for our principals. We have a central office tool. We have, for every work group, there are components of that we use, evaluation of criteria that we use to evaluate staff. So we have a policy 5240, but that is there. And then C is instructional materials and required courses. We have a process that's outlined in policy 2020. The next one is having guidance and counseling and testing services, and that's guided by our policy 2140. E is learning resources program. The learning resources program is maintained. We have 2 policies on that. So there's 2 there. F, the physical facilities of each building are adequate and appropriate. We have policy 6800. G, there is adequate provision for health and safety of all students who are in our care, and that's policy 3410. H is pertaining to the administration operation of the school district as far as online and administrative offices and everything, and visitation rights, how we have volunteer processes. And that is policy 4200, parent access and safe and orderly learning environment. I is that we will be inclusive and non-discrimination will be evident. We will not discriminate, and we regardless of any factor. And so we have the policy 3210, non-discrimination and inclusive schools. J is that it has to do with student discipline, that we're guided and required in some cases, certain ways to approach discipline and what type of discipline will take place for certain types of behaviors. So that's policy 3241 and procedure 3241. And we have to say very specifically what our high school graduation requirements are, how many credits, what classes, what assessments, all of that has to be outlined, and it's outlined in policy 2410. And then talks about equivalency among teachers and programs and resources between schools that are identified as title schools and non-title. So in other words, we do a report that's called the comparability report that compares, and we make sure that there is comparable support and resources in between the 2 types of schools. And that is it. And I will say that these are listed, but policies and procedures they're reviewed. We have policy news that comes to us from WASDA, and when they say there's been a law that's changed, then we review that. But we also have a cycle of review of our policy. We do 2 series a year. So if there's no action here, it's just a report.
Thank you for that in-depth report. Next on our agenda is our teachers out of field. This will be presented by Eric Young, our Director of Community Reach.
Yes, good evening, directors. Yes, thank you. Happy to be here. This is our annual Teachers Out of Field. So every year we have teachers that are teaching subjects that they're have a specific certificate for. They do have a teaching certificate in another area, but it doesn't cover the exact class that they're teaching. Typically middle school, high school are where we find these more. Although there are a couple of elementary ones on there too, really unique situations. So you've seen the list there. I don't know if you have any questions, but this is a kind of an annual thing. Almost not about putting on the consent agenda, but it is a little different every year. So
I know there was a question, Eric, about how long is that list each year? And I know that I compared this year's.
It's about the same.
It's just one.
Yeah, there's one additional this year from last year. So it's usually in the 20s. That's where we've kind of stayed pretty steady in mid 20s or so. A lot of online classes where they're not actually teaching the class, or just maybe correcting the assignments or something for the classes. So they're not actually delivering instructions.
So they won't get recertificated, they'll just, is it a temporary thing?
Yeah, well, sometimes it's temporary. Some of them have been on that list every year. There's a science teacher, for instance, has a physics certificate and teaches earth science, but probably won't go actually get the earth science. Has probably had many classes in earth, in science, so he's very well qualified to do it. So I have quite a few like that are just kind of on there. And then there's others that maybe are on just once. Ben Mendro this year is filling in French, where the teacher last year left, and we, have 1 or 2 sections left. Want to get the students through French, but didn't want to hire another teacher for those couple of sections. So, so it just depends on the situation. Good question. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is an action item Do we have a motion to approve the teachers out of field report?
I make a motion to approve the teachers on the field.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the teachers out of field report. Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman,
Aye.
President Levesque, aye. Director Dan, aye. Thank you. That report is approved. Next up, we'll have our financial highlights of our current budget. Welcome, Gina.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Gina Zutenhorst, Executive Director of Financial Services. I'm here with our monthly report. We are here at a time that coincides with when we have our budget and enrollment reports on the consent agenda. So it's always nice to be speaking more specifically about some of the financial highlights, because otherwise those consent agenda things can just kind of run by. To start off, we'll talk about the financial health of the district. We have some very good positive things going for our district. We have a very healthy beginning fund balance that we started with this year that helps sustain our operations. We have our 4-year educational programs and operations levy. It makes up about 10% of our total revenues. And this is the 3rd year of our 4-year levy. We have federal funds, but something that's a little bit of a bright star for us this year that is COVID pandemic related funding that has continued this year, whereas many of our funding, pandemic source funding has ceased or been exhausted, is our Department of Health Learn to Return grant. So that is continuing. That's a positive. And then our capital levy for 22-23 is the 3rd year of that 6-year capital levy. And you have heard several reports over the years of the work that's being done through that capital levy on our facilities. Next, we talk about our positives, but now we also have quite a few challenges that are for this year heightened. So our board for 22-23 recommended that we spend down our fund balance, which has supported programs and services multiple years through some really challenging times, but it results in a declining ending fund balance. And we have been talking about that for months, but we continue to make sure that that remains in the top of our awareness that that is what's happening. We are estimated to end this year with an ending fund balance of 4.2 million. That was for the budget. I do think that there'll be some variation in that. I don't think we'll be quite that low, but I still want to draw that attention because that is the lowest it has ever been. Our enrollment is a challenge for us in that it is recovering more slowly than we had hoped. We had about 5,500 students, 5,600 students prior to the pandemic situation. And then we lost about 8% of that enrollment during that first year of the school closures, about 450 students. Since then, we have been gaining, and it's about 100 to 150 students that we have been increasing, but we are still not back to the level that we were before the pandemic.
Are the new students in the pre-K and the transitional programs that we just heard about, are they FTE? You get credit for those?
We do not, preschool is not counted.
But transitional K we would. Transitional K.
And developmental preschool to the extent that it is special needs, would any of them count?
For
If there were special needs?
no.
So no. But it's still very beneficial that we have that program, obviously. Okay, and then, like I've said, federal relief funds have been exhausted. And then we're continuing to recover from the pandemic. And mostly where I want to express that is just the continued need for the services that are offered through our programs. Students have and teachers have expressed also the witnessing just a lot of high need, a lot of behavioral outcomes that they're seeing in the classroom, probably at all ages, social, emotional health needs. And so it has left a big impact there. And we are continuing to staff at those higher levels in order to maintain higher service levels to help in the academic recovery, to accelerate learning. And the state funding models that were reformulated, let me try to say that again, reformulated by the McCleary changes in legislation, really kind of came more about in 2018. This leads to continued funding gaps between how the state funds school districts and how the school districts operate and staff and have costs. So funding gaps. And then we do have certain programs with very unique needs, and this is a statewide issue that highlights that the state is not adequately funding, appropriately funding, whatever word you would use, amply funding special education needs. And those are very important, and we have legal requirements that we need to meet for what the students need. And the state is not adequately funding that. So we are spending more than what we receive from the state in that area by a significant amount. And then we are preparing for future reductions that would be enacted for the 23-24 budget. So that is a really impactful challenge that we're going through this year as a process.
Even if I was gonna write my legislators tonight, and I was gonna say, our school district is not funded enough, what kind of ballpark figures could I share with them about what our needs are for special ed and what we're funded for special ed? And what's the gap?
Don't have a good answer for that
Maybe
very
next month.
quickly.
They'll be in session for a while.
I will say that, if you don't mind, Gina,
Go ahead, please.
is that the state pays, if you look at your student population, and if you up to 13.5 or 13.6%, they will pay an apportionment for that number. But we're above that. I think we're closer to 15%.
That 15% of our population is in that category.
Yes.
Okay, I want to know what that percentage is. Okay.
Yes, so there's a gap right there. So if you know, I can't tell you the exact
Yeah.
amount, but there's a gap right there.
Mary, to dovetail on Gina, I very much would think it would be great if we could get these numbers and we get testimony,
Yeah.
either from you and or special ed or people who know this intimately. We need testimony and I need to do that. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
we need to coordinate that.
Yeah, and I have some big round ballpark numbers, but that is not gonna be meaningful really for what they want is, what's your story? What draws them into the uniqueness of seeing the need? Because numbers don't really talk a lot unless you have the real facts of what this means. This many students that are high need, this many students that we are providing one-on-one paraeducators or special care for that are outside of what we are provided for by the state, which results in approximately X million of dollars. So, yeah.
And you think you can get pretty specific? You can.
Yeah,
I just asked.
I would rely a lot on I have the dollars, but I don't have the stories.
So we can get the stories. Yeah, I think that would be important because I think that's the only thing that's gonna move the needle on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that the more people that can give their stories, the better, but that's constantly what OSPI is telling us. We
Yeah.
need the stories. They need the
How does
stories.
this impact?
Yeah, so, yeah, I'll stay connected.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we have our financial statements done as of December. So I'm reporting to you what our fund balance is as of December 2022. And we've been looking at this chart each month. It shows you the trend of multiple years laid up against each other from month to month to month. The fund balance bounces around depending on how much revenue comes in that much and month and how much the expenditures go out that month. And the high months, the October and the April, are when the property taxes from the county are collected and distributed to us. So those months are always higher than their neighboring months. But you can see that the dark blue line at the bottom of the chart is our this year's chart. It is our this year's fund balance numbers. And you can see that the market trend, we started lower than we had in previous years. We're following the line that we usually do, but it is lower than previous year's history. And part of that was because of why it was so high in previous years was a result of the McCleary funding changes that resulted in a larger balloon to funding upfront. And then over the course of time, it's coming down and down and down. And the year that is not up there is 18-19, and that year was even higher than what you see there for the start. And our minimum fund balance would have us be more at the $7 or $8 million range. So typically, we have had more fund balance, more reserves, more flexibility there than what we would necessarily be required to have by board policy. So that's just a comment that I'm making there. We have talked and had some flexibility around our ending fund balance for this year, knowing that it is going to come in at a lesser level than what would be required by our minimum. But we were suggested, recommended, directed, our board input within all of the happenings was that what better time to utilize our fund balance to get us through another year than on the heels of this pandemic. Otherwise, we would have had to be reducing by a large magnitude in a previous year. And we were just coming out of the pandemic. And with the behavioral needs that I just spoke about, that did not make sense, especially when we had more fund balance than we were required to. So just comments there. Our enrollment recovery, when talking about how that is recovering more slowly than hoped, I kind of talked about these figures already, but you can kind of see that up there, that over the course of 6 years, we have increased by 138 as a cumulative total, kind of up, down, up, down. We went down in 2021, and then we have recovered 109 students in 21-22. But in 22-23, we budgeted to be at a certain level, which would have been 164 more students. We are not quite there, but we are still 100 more-ish than we had last year. So, and as you know, enrollment drives funding from the state and many other things. We've talked about how we've been maintaining higher levels of services, and mostly I mean that through our staffing levels. And we have, as you can see, been staffed up. We didn't decrease our staff down in alignment with where enrollment might have dictated. Some of that was propped up by federal funds. Some of our ESSER funds helped support that. But you can see that over the course of the 6 years, we've increased by about 50 in the certificated area, which is our instructional staff, and about 57 in the classified area, which is staff that don't hold a teaching certificate. And then there's administrator category as well. So overall, about 108 of FTE increase. And that's very beneficial to us because that helps with the services that we're able to provide in smaller class sizes. But when you look at what our enrollment has increased, it doesn't necessarily align. So that's part of what we talk about as we're going forward with our challenging circumstances. I've already talked about these points. Fund balance is being used as a one-time rainy day fund. And this is what a potential forecast would look like for this year. 22-23 is the far left column, and then a projection of 3 years out from now, from there. And it shows that in order to even arrive at that 4.1 million in 23-24, we would need to reduce by about 5 million. And the reduction target may be likely to be greater than that when we get the factors that we don't currently know and can't currently anticipate is what the legislature is going to do. And that will greatly impact what we believe we'll be receiving in revenue. Our estimate of enrollment will greatly receive what we think we'll be receiving, and also our expenditures that are tied to that.
Can you translate that 4.95 million into people?
No, because that would assume maybe, but that would assume, certain categories are an average salary of around this, and certain categories are an average.
If there was something, it's hard for me to conceptualize that. So if you said 50 people and this is how many we employ, like what percentage of human beings are we talking about?
Yeah.
If we could do that.
I
Not
still,
tonight,
but I'll just say that I'll remind, and I think we've heard this together, it's that as our budget goes, because of what we do, we're 86% made up, our costs are 87% made up of salary and benefits of the staff that we employ to do the work that we do. So in our reductions, we would be, and this is the work that the Budget Advisory Task Force is digging in with, and that we're working with getting community input and feedback, some of this will have be accomplished through reduction in stuff, materials and supplies. Where can we go first that will not impact the classroom is certainly a value that is clearly upheld very high, even before we start asking the questions. We know that. So I don't have a figure. We're just calculating roughly, and it's going to change.
right?
So,
There's,
yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's
Hard to
seems a whole lot of
quantify.
money and,
yeah.
but you're right, 86% is where, yeah, the dollars are going. So
Yeah.
Just we. need the
It
people.
will not be just two people, I'll say that, it will
I know.
not be just two, so I would.
It's hard for me to wrap that around my head because everybody is needed.
Yeah, sorry, I don't.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's kind of small on my screen. Can you tell me what the regionalization factors are? Oh, thank you. Look at that, better. And then I noticed that you put in some numbers for enrollment and you're assuming some trends. Would it be more beneficial to lower our expectations for enrollment? Because we've kind of seen a pattern
Yeah,
of less.
until I am able to do those comprehensive calculations and the 3-year adjustment. These figures of the revenues are based on the old enrollment projections.
Okay.
So I don't have the figures of what they would be yet with the lesser, and it will change with what the legislature does, so. Yeah. But eventually there will be different figures to look at, yeah. And that you can see the regionalization factor right now. But next year it would be at 14, and that's something that I'm hopeful that the legislature may address. That would be helpful if they could, but I.
Because the expectation right now is that it just keeps decreasing 1% every year.
Which
So
makes
in
no sense. which
15
is-
years,
like,
it'll be
don't
down
wanna-
to
yeah, why do we-
15%.
Yeah,
Which is, that sounds nuts to me.
yeah. So this is just laying the ending fund balance up against what would be a target minimum fund balance if the board adjusted its minimum fund balance from being what it is, 8% of 1 month's average operating expenditures to 5%. And I have also done a slide showing what it would be at if it was a 6% minimum fund balance. That's 6% of your full operating expenditures.
Can you make your screen a little bit?
Sure. So, yes, that's at the 5%. So you can see that with reductions, we would be pretty close in 23-24 and in 24-25, and that in 25-26, we would be, according to this, back where we are in compliance with that level. So those are the levels at what it is now, the top part, and then the level at 5% is just below that. And we've looked at this a few times in our monthly reports, but here's what those fund balances would be if they were a target minimum fund balance of 6%. Those are in the 5 million to 6 million, close to $6 million range for a minimum fund balance. And then if I lay that up against the same fund balances that I had on the previous slide against the new targets, that's how much we would be short of that target. Just according to these first blush figures from old projections even. So we would still be short of that, which would in turn might mean that we would need to adjust what we reduced by in order to come into a better alignment with what our target minimum fund balance should be.
So I anticipate you'll be coming to the board soon to ask us to change the board policy, to change this policy.
Possibly, I don't have a target of when we would do that, we would be out until this fiscal year, the end of this fiscal year. And we still have the caveat that we have emergency, provisions that are being pointed to for why we are the way we are. So, I think that a proposal for a change in fund balance is in our future, but I'm not quite sure what that's looking like yet.
Is the budget task force discussing any options for changing the policy, or like any recommendations? Are they just?
We have talked about it as the idea of it being an assistance with where we need to land for potential reductions, as that being a place to save off. But I would think that we may end up with a temporary change and still come back to a target of this, and it is a target, so we may not want to live in the 5% range, even if we are understanding that that's what we planned to do all along, and the board was in support of that, and we're still in compliance with our policies. But so there's still a lot of flexibility around that and decisions to come. Okay. Thank you. Moving on. Just laying plans for the future. We are still taking this year very carefully as vacancies and retirements come in. If they are vacating currently, like now, a lot of retirements, if they're coming in, they're saying, I will retire late at the end of the year. But for some, they are current. And in those cases, we're having to really evaluate, can we hold off for a little bit on that? Because we're looking at those things. We're talking about delaying the replacement of equipment, reducing travel, supplies, overtime, and just looking for everywhere that we can kind of make our financial situation better this year to put us in a line for a better next year. And our work for developing a reduced educational programs and services for next year is underway. We started with our budget advisory task force meetings. We've got about 30 people, community, parents, students, and staff. Not all are always, present every time. Thank you for our student advisors as well, and our board members that are on that for your time. But those meetings have been underway. We've had 3, and we're going to have a budget forum meeting tomorrow as our first one at the BPAC, and then we'll have a couple more. So we're just in that process of getting communication out so that people understand what's going on and why we are at where we're at, and getting feedback that will help inform the decision-making process that we're going through. One of the activities that we've been doing that it seems to be working well is talking about having the group work through what are your worries, what are your values and priorities, what are your hopes and ideas. And that has been kind of a table talk, and then we have share out on that. So that's part of what we will be doing with the budget forum as well. The budget advisory task force has had quite a bit more deep dive into how school funding works. So they are getting that deeper education of that. And then just reminding about the legislative session and the timing on that. This is a long session. They will not be concluding till April 23, which, yes, that is a Sunday. Double check that deadline. And we have a board meeting on the 24th. We would need to be proposing for board approval what the reduction would be by the April 24th or the May 8th meeting at the very latest, because we have contractual obligations for staff notification of employment, of continuing employment by May 15 is written into our teachers group. So for that in particular, that's a hard deadline in the sand. And then I think this is the last slide. Yes, you guys are still done. Revenues, enrollment uncertainty, kindergarten, first grade. some of those figures. If we get more students than we're planning, that will help our revenues, that will help change our financial picture. Legislative action, we've been talking about that the whole time, regionalization rebase, increasing their sped funding. If they do other kinds of increases to the prototypical school model, that will help our situation. Expenditures, just the outcome of our future salary negotiations that we undergo every year or every contract, when the contract is up. And then the cost inflator that is set by the state legislature that affects everything. And just our careful spending that we've been talking about for 22 this year to help our situation for next year.
About an hour ago, we approved some travel. Do you recall how that was funded?
Which one is it to the?
There was an AHS journalism one and an AHS like jazz choir and administrator attending middle level education institute.
Okay, so the student ones are likely almost fully funded by associated student body, partially funded by personal contribution of those families that are attending. It's possible that the teacher part might be, if it's CTE, the teacher part might be partially funded by CTE funds. I'd have to, there's funding sheets, I think, that are attached to that, but yeah, these are not supported by the basic ed general fund.
And the staff member that is going to a conference, according to our collective bargaining agreements with certain groups, and that group has an agreement of professional development. There's a certain amount, so they use their professional development funds for their bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to add on, excuse me, for the flight. I'm in flight, so we fund our own trip from last year's profits. So last year's cabaret, and we had, I think, about $4,000 or $5,000 from last year, and then we had our Christmas show and just all that advertisement of people coming to see us. So that also helps go towards our trip, and then whatever's left, the students contribute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marge. I am thankful for your attention and your engagement on all the details, and I'm done. If you have questions, I will try to answer, but know that I'll be here next month as well. And we will hopefully each time have a little more of the puzzle to share.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, we will welcome Brian Lewis to come and address us about our adoption of the 23-24 enrollment. Brian, welcome tonight.
As Director Levesque said, we're going to be speaking about the enrollment projection for the 2023-2024 school year. Last month, no, 2 weeks ago, not last month, 2 weeks ago, we presented to you a preview of the enrollment projection, and I just want to take all the drama out of it right now. We're not changing our enrollment projection from the preview. I do want to talk about a couple of aspects, though. I'm going to skip through the definitions right now of annual average FTE and head count. Focus on the factors that influence enrollment. They're listed here for your review, but the one that's having the biggest effect on us this year and next year is pandemic related. Pandemic is still echoing throughout our school systems, and we saw it most severely in kindergarten enrollment in 2022-2023. This year, in the past, we've had an average over the past 25 years, a relationship, a mathematical relationship between the number of student or children born to parents that live within the zip code 98223 and their appearance in our schools in kindergarten 5 years later. And that's been about 84%, a little under 84%. This year, there was a pretty big change to 71%, which is, and last time I referred to it as a seismic shift, and it is, because it changes such a big variance from the norm, is monumental. And what we don't know is that going to continue into the first grade. So right now, we're working on the assumption with this enrollment estimate that what we're experiencing in kindergarten right now is not going to reverse in the first grade. And every kindergartner that didn't show up in our schools this year is not going to appear enrolled next year. We're assuming that the kindergarten kids we have this year will be the first graders that we have next year. So that is another change in how we forecast enrollment. Because in the past, we've just been able to roll forward. We've used the weighted average method. We're able to roll forward our kindergartners and assume about an approximately 10% increase between the number of students in K in 1 year and the number of students in grade 1 in the following year. We're not making that assumption this year. We're using the April rollout method to forecast enrollment and assuming that the number of kids that we have this year in April will be the number of kids we have next year in the following grade.
Jerry, did you have a question?
I just had a question. So in Lakewood, where I work, they're projecting more kindergarten, right? So I'm just curious, we're not projecting. So is that maybe because it being a different socioeconomic group of families?
Not necessarily. It's really more reflective of our experience this year. I'm not sure what happened in Lakewood this year in terms of their kindergarten enrollment. What I do know that happened in Lakewood was that they had a double levy failure and they were able to get a levy approved for collection beginning in this year. But they've already made changes in terms of their expenditures, and they're not going to have that condition occur in the following year. I think, and as far as expectation, I know that doesn't necessarily relate directly to enrollment, but it does have an effect on the kinds of risk you can take. They can tolerate more variance than we can. I sincerely hope I'm wrong in this forecast for enrollment, but I'd rather be wrong and we have more kids than not enough.
I just thought it was odd to be like a kind of a neighboring district, and I'm trying to run my, like, I'm thinking about why Lakewood is kind of steady or growing. I mean, we're kind of at capacity kindergarten we have in my particular school. And I just,
I honestly have no doubt that we will grow. We will start growing again at some point in the future.
Turbulence right now.
Yeah, and when we talk about this in the facilities advisory committee, and people say, how can you forecast a decreased enrollment for next year? Look at all the construction that's going on around us. Well, 90% of our students come from single family homes and not apartment buildings. So there are a lot of apartment buildings under construction. But we don't necessarily see that as resulting in more students coming into our school buildings. So there is, some single family home construction still occurring. And it may be that I just want to make sure that you guys understand too, that townhomes count as single family homes for these purposes. But apartment buildings are multifamily and they don't generate as many students. So there are townhomes under construction and townhomes in the permitting process right now. It is just a matter of time. But at this point, given the condition, our financial condition, and this big change that we've seen in kindergarten enrollment this year, we're advising to not bank on enrollment growth next year.
So Brian, some of the new apartments that are sprouting up are 55 and up and senior, we don't count those at all in our calculations, correct?
No. And that's, when I look at the demographic report that was generated for us by Flow Analytics, they exclude those from their estimated growth. And we also tend to exclude studio and 1-bedroom apartments because they don't generate as many students as 2+ bedroom apartments do. We know for every 2+ bedroom apartment that's constructed, we can expect to get 0.2 of an FTE. For every single family home, we can expect 0.4 in FTE. But there's still way more single family homes and. Any further questions before we move on? Okay. So I'm going to skip the transitions discussion because we're using the April roll-up again. I want to make clear that that's our recommendation for 23-24 school year. It does not take into account transitions that may occur between grade levels. It just takes the number of kids that we've got in April, rolls them forward 1 year. And I'm also taking the live births that occurred in 2017, multiplying those by 0.71 to come up with the kindergarten enrollment estimate. I referred to this this article, the snippet from this article last time. It just confirms that, you know, the State Forecast Council is expecting lower enrollment through 24-25. This is a chart from drawn from the Flow Analytics report showing our head count and what our current head count is at 5,425, which is less than what we had in 2017-18. So we did suffer a major loss of students in 2019-20. And it's coming back, but it's slower than what we had thought it would be. So this graphic represents, you know, the XY scale, the volatility of the different methodologies for enrolling or enrollment projection against the conservativeness of the estimate. The weighted historical averages generally weighted no balances to because of what we see happening. We're recommending the most conservative estimate that they will roll out. This was included on the last enrollment preview. Just the only change I've made to this is include the label recommended for the recommendation of the enrollment estimate that we're asking you to approve. This shows the elementary schools by grade level and compares what our estimate is for 2023-2024 annual average FTE to the budget. We staffed a budget generally, so that's why I'm using these two, comparing apples to apples. So expecting 4 more students at Presidents, 51 fewer than budget at Pioneer, 11 more at Eagle Creek, and 58 at Camp Prairie. Now, we've already made changes in staffing at those school buildings to accommodate what we experienced this year. But Mr. DeYoung is the expert on that, but I know that we did make some changes in kindergarten classes at Camp Prairie and Pioneer to respond to this. Middle schools, 17 fewer students at Post and 11 more at Howard. Arlington High School, 19 fewer students at Arlington High School, and estimating the same for Weston for next year. So really the bulk of the change that we're expecting to happen is going to be at the elementary level at K1. SVLC, an increase of 6, and Open Doors, we're expecting that to remain flat. That's a difficult one because there's so many conditions that go into playing who's going to be at Open Doors. I'll go back up to the cumulative number of 5,373, including Running Start for next year. We're at 5,424. We're expecting by the time we get to the end of the school year will be 5,424 annual average FTE. So we are looking at a decline, and that's purely based on the same numbers of students in kindergarten appearing in first grade next year and a lower kindergarten class next year as well. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Question. It was kind of brought to the board's attention about the weighted historical average of going from 5th to 6th. So I wondered if that was considered, I didn't see it on here during the transitions, but, if you could maybe teach me a little bit about that.
So, Chris did share that with me, and I went back and looked at, history, and we're talking about 17, at that particular school, 17 students at that grade level on average over the past 3 years. And at that point, then it becomes kind of a scheduling issue because some classes have fewer students in them, some sections have fewer students in them than others. And some may be feeling that the full brunt of that number of students in the classroom.
Okay.
So, but honestly, this was not something that was brought up during our review with flow analytics. So in my future iterations of projection, we'll take a more careful look at this and see when we change back to the weighted average method, which does incorporate transitions, is this something that's significant?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did have a question about that too. The board just determines the total number for the enrollment. And then the district, you guys get to do all the magic massaging of the numbers to figure out which grade levels and which schools, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we only have to really worry about the big number.
Yeah, and like at the middle school level, there may be some families that had attended a feeder school or post that make a decision. We're gonna ask for an district transfer to Howard, and vice versa too. And that really could happen at any of our levels. Those are difficult to project. Really the only tool that we have available to mitigate that is to say no more interdistrict transfers. So we don't necessarily want to do that. So sometimes there are things that happen, and we do respond. If we've got more students showing up, we do respond with additional staffing.
You're a student, if I didn't have any questions, this is one of the most important things that the board gets to decide. Do you have any questions or?
Not at this time.
Okay, I don't think so either, no. This is an action item. The board gets to determine the total number for our enrollment for 2023-24. Do we have a motion or question?
So we're deciding whether to use an April roll-up or different.
Yes.
So if I remember the pictures, that April was the very bottom one, or their incline. You had a picture of 3 different, yeah. So that was the more conservative, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's what we were leaning towards conservative.
And you can see the difference between the weighted average as a 12 student decline from this year versus 127, and then the cohort survival method, which is the methodology that the state used. I spoke about that earlier and how that was very volatile. It tends to amplify changes that are occurring into the future more than, in my experience, is appropriate. And so there, if we use the cohort survival, we're looking at 219. So while that may be the least conservative in terms of the nature of the estimate, it's also the most volatile, and not something I would recommend.
Can you remind me what we decided last year? Did we stick with the lowest number or something in the middle?
No, we used the middle number, which was weighted average last year.
And how far off are we right now?
77.
I personally, I'm kind of in Brian's camp that way. I'd rather go conservative, hope for the best, but plan for something that could be more realistic.
After hearing from Gina about our financial situation, I am much more in favor of the lowest conservativist, most cautious number.
I think we can't really afford to do anything else right now.
And we will be responsive. It wouldn't matter what year it is, but whatever the number is, at the beginning of the year, we meet every day for the first 10 days to see what the numbers are, and see where the hotspots are, see where you might need to add a class or support in some way.
So most recommended one.
So this is an action item, so we need a motion.
I make a motion, we go with the suggestion of the medium using 2023-24 April
5373.
5373.
Second.
Second, or
It's been moved and seconded to approve the enrollment projection of 5373.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Nat.
Aye. There's your nice even number, 5373.
It's still going.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for that very in-depth presentation. Next up is the fun part. I mean, we had a lot of fun, but
Now we're on.
I mean, budgets are fun, enrollment is great, but
Enrollment conversations more than meetings.
I'm excited for Carrie to present us our Universal Design for Learning update. Welcome, Carrie Anderson Burr.
Thank you, thank you. We are very excited to be here too. I'm talking some more about universal design. So just a quick reminder, this is connected to the board goal, I think it's number 2, keeping up to date on best instructional practices that are going on in school. Now, one of the things that I worry about is I don't want to ever be disingenuous. So universal design is not new. This is the second year of it being an initiative in our district, but the principles of universal design are not new. What we're emphasizing is the simple features of universal design, variability, that kids learn differently and have different needs, and they're not broken because they have different learning needs. That's part of human variation. It's healthy, it's good. We also emphasize the importance of firm goals with flexible means. So what you are going to hear tonight from the intrepid 4th grade teachers here to present from Eagle Creek is what they have done, what they have been working on quite a while, but also what they've done through the initiative of UDL, right? One more reminder before they come up and I introduce them by name, and that is there are 3 ways to think about addressing variability when it comes to lesson planning and unit planning, and that is addressing variability in how you engage students in why they're learning what they're learning, in how they access the learning itself, and in how they show what they know at the end. And the 4th grade team at Eagle Creek is so far ahead of it that they're going to talk to you a little bit about each of those 3 buckets. So I would like to call them forward. We have Julie Polkinghorn, we have Corey Tim, and we have Leanne Burbick. They're here to share with you tonight.
Hi. Welcome. Yeah, thanks for having us. So again, I'm Corey Tim, this is Julie Polkinghorn, and this is Leanne Burbeck. I want to start by thanking Leanne. She created this whole slideshow and put all our thoughts and ideas together. So you're going to be hearing mostly from Julie and I instead, because we're not the tech people. Thank you. You're awesome. So, as you know, universal design for learning is something that we're just starting to really dig into, using that framework with Fidelity. But again, like Carrie said, it's not new. A lot of the things that you're going to see here are things you probably will recognize from your own kids' classrooms that you've seen going on throughout the years. And one way that we thought we should start digging into this is by focusing on the barriers that we're trying to remove for students as they access their learning and show their learning. And we wanted to do that by giving them some choice, because we know that student choice is a motivator and it's one of the big components of UDL. So that's what we're going to be hearing from us mostly today. So for us, it made the most sense as a team to start thinking about math back fluency. It seemed like a really natural and logical place for us to start, since in 4th grade, multiplication is a huge deal for us. And because there are so many barriers to student learning, when it comes to that, there are emotional barriers, anxiety, that timing aspect always, probably right now you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, gives me some anxiety. There's so many different learning styles in our classroom, the way that they learn those math facts. Not everybody can do the flashcards, but some kids love it. So we started off by identifying those barriers, the emotional ones, dysgraphia, fine motor skill issues some students might have. Some students like working socially, some like working in solitary ways. So as a team, we got together and we identified as many of those things as we could. And then we sat together and we created a math fact practice menu. So you'll see there's 2 columns. One side, students can choose to work alone on all these options, and the other side, they can choose to work with a partner. And they can choose anything from either side any day that we work through this menu. And on the menu, there are different options that include things like games that can be done alone or with a partner, technology, paper and pencil, some kids love that, flashcards, did I say technology? I think I said some technology options too. Paper and pencil, yeah. So we just tried really hard to come up with different ways that we could alleviate any of these potential barriers. And so we asked the students, after we've been doing this for a while, what they thought about it, and their feedback was awesome, as always, of course. And so I'm not going to read you all these quotes, but you can kind of read through them. But the themes that stood out to us were that they really appreciate the ability to choose, and there was this pride of ownership in their learning. Also, they love to work with each other, especially something that came out I thought was really neat was that they like working with a partner who's at a different ability level than they are, because they feel like they are stronger because of that. And vice versa. They like being able to help somebody with a skill that they're good at. So it goes both ways. Also, they found sometimes a different way of practicing something than they had before, and they were surprised by that. So they're learning about how they learn best, and that was really neat for us to see. So once we kind of felt really comfortable with the math facts, we decided we were going to dig into writing. So there are so many different ways you can grade writing, right? So we were thinking of the ideas and organization piece of the writing that we wanted to talk about. What are the barriers to helping to students showing their best work with their ideas and their organization? So these are just some of the barriers that we thought of as a team, including fine motor skills, dysgraphia, work completion, perfectionism. Yeah.
What is dysgraphia? I don't know that.
Great question.
Yeah, I don't need that.
So dyslexia is a phonological processing issue, and dysgraphia directly relates to how that goes on a page in handwriting.
So if I see a word, I might transpose, I might think.
It could be visual. It can incorporate fine motor difficulties with handwriting. And it's kind of in that realm of connected with dyslexia. Sometimes kids who are struggling with dyslexia also struggle with dysgraphia, but it can be in isolation.
So if breaking down the word dys and the graphia, that means
a struggle with writing.
Struggle with writing. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
And also, Julie, you on the previous group of items that were barriers for math, you said dyscalculia. I'm assuming that's also
Related to
struggles
math.
with math.
Yeah, struggles with
Yeah.
numbers.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we just, again, there are emotional barriers, there are physical barriers, and then there are social barriers to writing that we identified. And then we came up with some choices to help students still show us that they attain the standard we expect them to, but in different ways with different choices. And Julie's gonna talk about that.
So we decided to give students some choice in how they publish their written work, handwritten work, typed, or using voice typing on the Chromebooks. And we really wanted to acknowledge that the areas that we're assessing students for can be assessed through any of these publishing methods. But it's really exciting to see student writing and their voice and their creativity come to life when they're given these options to show their thinking and their work, because those barriers have been removed. When kids have to put paper to pencil, and maybe that's not their preferred way of showing what they've learned, you don't get as much creativity or vocabulary or language. It's harder to assess their ability to organize their writing if they can't even get started on the paper. So removing those barriers by giving them these options really gives us more insight as to where they're at as a writer. And it kind of gives us a way to assess where they're at in each of the areas that we're trying to grade them.
Do the children get to decide, students get to decide which method of publishing?
Yeah,
So
that's really the thing.
wouldn't most kids gravitate toward the technology because everybody wants a computer?
You would think so,
I would-
but they don't.
Really?
When you think they
No,
most of them like to handwrite it.
Yeah. Choose one fourth grade, typing on the computer. Do they know keyboard by fourth?
They do have experience. Well, all fourth graders have some experience with it because of distance learning. That's really something that
I just figured just hand typing, not like the formal, like,
On the voice typing, I think, helps the kids who have that writer's block, right? They can't get started. They just want to do it perfect, or they don't want to do it at all. And voice typing has taken away that
that fear, I think.
I'll say that,
Yeah.
one of my children has sensory with the pencil, like the pencil on the paper, like that just feels like they can't stand it. So the voice typing has been an amazing choice. So I really appreciate that.
So some of the other things that they end up learning as a result of having these choices are all of the online editing tools, spell check. They're still responsible for using conventions and, but they learn a new way to add capitalization and punctuation at the end. They also, I think a side effect of this is they become fluent in rereading their text because voice typing isn't always accurate.
Yeah.
And so they have to reread their own writing multiple times to make sure what's represented on the screen is what they intended to type. So I think that's an incredible bonus. Sometimes kids just want to write it and turn it in.
Yeah. Not responsible like they're done, like I know this is over.
So, Julie, what percentage would you say are using the voice typing? I don't know if I could come up with.
I would say probably 2 out of 24 kids in my class.
So very small.
Very small. Very small.
Mine's different. The majority of my students chose voice type.
Isn't that funny?
But we set up little sound booths.
Oh, I mean, I was on.
Yeah.
Their office.
Yes, their office.
So here are some examples of published student work that was either typed or was typed. You can see that I'm changing the font, the size of the font. That it's tricky.
They're gonna learn, really.
Inserting pictures or graphics is also a skill that's a bonus. Giving them these options, learning how to type the dialogue into a story. Those are really important skills that they develop by giving them this choice.
I was just gonna say, it seems like, no, this is only 4th grade, but I know middle school starts to do the graphic novels. And I could see that maybe if kids are reading at that level, that they could imbue that in something too, make that an option, like creating that dialogue and.
Yeah.
You know, I'm guessing this is more nonfiction related, but still, you could still put some.
I have given kids the option to publish their personal narratives as a graphic novel or as a comic book. And then just selected a bunch of blank comic book style pages and given them those pages to publish it.
Thanks.
As long as their writing is there and all the elements that we're teaching and assessing are present, and how they choose to publish it is up to them. Any other questions about writing or not? Okay, so our Simon project is an exciting 4th grade project where we actually partner with the state of Washington and hatchery, the Arlington hatchery, and we get 250 eggs for our students to watch, hatch, and raise. This is connected with a science project with the science standard around structures and functions of organisms. And so this entire project really is crosswalking with informational text. There's an art component, there's scientific observation. At the end of it, we take a field trip to Lake Goodwin to release the fish. We have, they learn water quality testing. We incorporate guest speakers that come in, and then they actually do some writing as part of the project as well. At the end of the project, they are asked to create a work that includes the 6 life cycle stages of the fish and these components of each life cycle stage. So the name of the stage, the structure that helps the fish survive at that stage, habitat, food threat, and then an interesting fact and a rubric. Student barriers to a project like this are many, but included with that are heavy scientific content, organization of really complex information, artistic expression is part of it, written expression can be part of it. And so to eliminate some of those barriers, we decided to give kids a choice in how they represent their learning. So one of their choices is an informational poster. This includes graphics of the 6 life stages, and then there's some written work that goes along with it to explain each of those components that was outlined on the rubric. This really speaks to kids that like that creative component. The posters are hung up at the school, so they're visible for all the other kids as they walk by. And for kids who are interested in that style of representing their learning, that really speaks to their needs. Another option is a process grid. This is for those kids that really want to just fill in the boxes. The paper is pre-printed, so with the numbers and the categories that are required, and it really scaffolds their organizational needs to just put the information that they've learned using the resources that they have into each category. And then we have that as their culminating project. Google slide deck presentation is another option. The slides were created by Leanne ahead of time. So they just fill in the boxes, but they're doing this online. They get to insert graphics, play with the font. They can write in complete sentences or make it more of a bulleted list, whatever their preference is, as long as the information is all there. And then the last option is an informational essay, and that's what you have here. So 1 paragraph for each life stage. And I think one of the big outcomes that surprised us by giving kids these 4 choices was that kids wanted to do more than one. They were really excited about it and didn't want to just limit themselves to sharing what they had learned in one way. So these are some examples of the choices that we're offering, and then hopefully eliminating some barriers at the same time. The standards aren't changing, the objectives aren't changing, just the way kids are showing their learning and accessing the, Is this a group project or is it very individual? And what do you do if a student is really challenged to get something done? What supports do you offer? And then what happens if a kid is done super fast and they need a higher challenge? When you say the secret project, you mean the FISH project? The FISH project, It's grade level, our entire grade.
I mean, the culminating project?
Yeah.
That's
project.
individual.
Do they do it each?
They all do it individually, so they're all kind of working on different things at different times, and they do help each other.
Yeah.
They use each other as resources, which we encourage. And
They also always have the resources, the informational text and the observation notebooks and any of the materials that we've used, they have as resources. It's not like a, did you memorize it, take the test, pass or fail sort of situation. It's use the resources that you have and choose how you want to represent your learning. If a student is really struggling to get it done, as with any project or any expectation, we're going to do anything we can to meet the needs of that learner on an individual basis. It might be working with a partner, it might be,
sometimes they take it home, they just have your slower learners or
Pulling back.
slower workers. Yeah.
Pull them back for a small group during, during independent work time, pull them back and work with them privately at that table.
Well, and also the whole point of UDL, I think too, is to help students become aware of what their strengths are and maybe what some of their challenges are. And if they pick an option that maybe is more challenging for them, there is helping them work through it and helping them learn how to do it if that's something they're really motivated to do, or helping them realize like maybe your strengths are better suited to choosing this option, and let's see how that goes. So it's very individual. A couple kids that did that mid-project.
So we were able to offer kids more than one option if they finished early and ran out of time. And I think depending on the student and what their needs are and what their interests are, we would meet the needs of those students that need an extra challenge on a really individual basis. It could be choosing another project. It could be researching another organism and applying the same, life cycle and all of those categories on their rubric to a different organism. It kind of just depends on the kid and how much time we have.
I wanted to ask, questions, sorry. I wanted to ask, when they turn in those, like up to 4 assignments, do they just hand it to the teacher and then the teacher looks over it and grades it, or what is that?
It
look like?
depends on which one, so.
So like the paper ones that you had just said, like they.
Like
did
the
it
process grid or the.
Yeah,
poster.
those, do they just?
Yeah, they just hand them in and then.
Okay, because I don't think many students would offer to talk in front of the class, but do they get?
Oh, no.
Do they get
like
the-
a presentation?
Yeah, yeah.
Projects that we do include a presentation component.
Okay, just not this one.
This one they didn't, but I could see us doing that. I could see the posters.
Presentation.
The process grid chart, the essays, and even the Google Slides we printed out last year, and all of that was on display.
Yeah.
So like a piece of artwork maybe would go up in the hall.
Mhm.
These works additionally went up in the hall, all of them.
Got it, yeah. Because I was thinking, do you think it would be beneficial maybe for the students to share each of their thought processes? So the people that did essays, they can say, well, I did an essay because of da, 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 da. And like, if they're in like groups in the classroom, correct? Like
Table groups.
Yeah, if they could like share their ideas before going to like hand it up to the teacher and turning it in day of submission, they could be like, well, here's what I did and kind of put it on display. Cause I know I have a brother who's in 4th grade and he's a social butterfly, so he enjoys showing off and being like, well, this is what I did, so it's just an idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
There is some of that happening naturally.
Well, good. Good.
Yeah, we don't have to.
No, we don't have to encourage.
It's pretty good at collaborating.
Yeah. we can
Sharing.
Yeah.
I think the piece about asking a peer to look at their work for completeness or offer them feedback is really powerful for learners too, especially peer to peer.
Or even reflecting on this in UDL and choice, asking them to articulate why they chose what they chose is kind of what I was thinking you were saying.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, and thank you for all of your hard work with our students. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
This is fun. Was that more fun than budget? I mean.
You know, we did.
So our next item is our informational item. And we will start with our superintendent report. Dr. Sweeting.
So I wanted to put up something on as a slide, because part of my report tonight is just giving just give a sampling of the different activities and events that took place for to honor Martin Luther King Jr. And so that's what I'm going to do, is a sampling. I don't have something from every building, but I have a sampling. So here's a picture from still in Gormish Valley Learning Center and the students, and there's a big picture there with Martin Luther King behind them. This is Dream. So got that from SBLC. And Weston High School had Erin Jones, and she came and spoke from the heart. And it was there were good questions there, good conversation. At Howard Middle School, they had assembly students spoke there. That was a good event there. This is at President's. There was a student-led assembly, and the theme was My Own Two Hands. They had an Arlington High School student come and share her story. And it was powerful. That was the word that was shared. A teacher from President's had sent the board an email and said it was powerful. This is Erin Jones had also went to Arlington High School. So these are some pictures of her at Arlington High School. And then I wanted to read, I have permission, and this is from Post Middle School, and I'll end with this. It's called Dreams Like Stars, and it's a poem dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., written by Adrian E. Portinelli.
Is she a student?
Yes, he's a student at Post. Some people stared a blank page. Injustices filled the mind, chewing the end of their pencil, wanting words, looking for words, each night dreaming of life-changing words. The world we once knew, where the shade of your skin determined where you would sit on a bus, determined how good of a school you could be at. That world that was once so normal, so perfect, we found was not perfect. We found should not be normal, is not fair. Dreams gliding on wings of glass were shattered in that world that we once thought was the only way the world could work. But one man spent nights dreaming of words, words that could fill those pages, empty, empty pages. That man turned those dreams of a better world into words that fit on pages, that people could hear, that people could believe, that people could relate to, that people would act upon. So he wrote those words, page after page, filled those words with emotion, with honesty, with racial ideas, with passion. When he wrote these words, he knew people may hate him, despise him, call him crazy, mad, out of his mind. They may never understand why he was doing it, but he wrote those words anyway. Some people, they were happy, content with the world we live in, but they didn't see, they might never see, they might never allow themselves to see that every other shade, they didn't have places to shine, to show they had voices too. But this man, he had a voice and he used it. He spoke of a world unheard of, unknown, a world where everyone has the same rights as the human standing next to him. The world where people are kind, where people with skins of every color could get the job they deserve, could get the respect they deserve. He spoke of a world where children could grow up and be what they want to be, where his kids and everyone else's were safe to walk down the street. These dreams he once had, these dreams that were as far away as the stars in the sky, shining down on him, giving him hope, giving everyone hope. These dreams could change the world. Wanted to share that a student. Debbie, do you know what grade you did?
I don't think they communicated that with us, but it was Howard Middle School.
She should get an
Yeah, that was incredible.
Yeah, so I wanted to share that with you. It's very, very deep, very, very precious. So we had a lot of honoring, but it's not a one day, it's not a 1 week. It's every day that we must think about that. And the last thing I was going to say is that the budget form is tomorrow night. Did you know we said it? So yay.
Fun, more fun. Thank you, Dr. Sudi, for sharing. That was incredibly well written, deeply moving, insightful, brilliant poem. Thank you for sharing. Next up, we'll have our legislative update and discussion.
Well, I just want to share, I went old school and put an article out of paper. Mr. Rectal seems to be making the rounds. He is all over the news, at least the news I'm reading. This was out of the Herald and it's titled, it's under guest commentary, state funding of special education gives students with disabilities full education. So kudos for Mr. Rectal for being our one-man show. And I love that. I'm always amazed at how much I can do with it. What is no longer a phone, it's a little tiny computer, because I was on there for the legislative. I'm dialed into something called In Session, so I get the updates on the bills, what's in the Senate, what's in the House. And I had something Sunday morning, and I was able to do a pro or con on it. So I submitted a pro comment for Senate Bill 5339 for free school meals program. House Bill is House Bill 1238. same one, they often do this, they co-sponsor different, and then they come in the middle and something gets passed. So I think that's a great start. There is another one. I'm gonna pull a few, Dr. Sweeting, if you can send it to the corresponding appropriate people in cabinet that might have feedback on this, but one is an apprenticeship program is getting a lot of buzz. I just inherently think that's a great thing. And I have to read, yeah, so promoting and supporting, oh, and then another one, Senate bill has promoting and facilitating use of professional learning communities. Amen, I like that as well. House Bill 1013 is regional apprenticeship programs, which I just said. And then another one I saw that's coming up, and I think they had a conversation today on the 23rd, providing school funding for school districts for special education. So I also found out from Marissa, I am going to be attending a session that's once a month on Mondays, which conveniently is at the end of the month when we don't have a board meeting. So I'll actually be meeting with other ledge reps on that. So I'm excited and I will keep you in. But for me, the clock is ticking. So April 23rd might seem a little ways away. It's really not in the legislative world, but it's a matter of keeping present on what bills are advancing. And I really need to get some stories. I mean, the data and stories. So I'm tasking folks in those areas, special ed. If the high school folks know about apprenticeship, if we know what that, we've had that conversation when we had businesses come to our district at the high school to talk about that. And yeah, I would say the regionalization, the factor of how this is descending, this is decreasing year by year, it makes no sense. I don't know how we're expected as educators. I feel like we're apples and oranges. We're not on the same playing field at all. And I don't know how to make the governor and the legislature be on our team. I don't know how to do it because understanding there's so many more things that the legislators are contending with, but of course I feel education is one of them. I do say though that the House Education Chair is Sharon Tomiko Santos, and I've only seen her via Zoom. She's kind of a tough cookie, I think. She's pretty good stuff, and she's a former school board director, so I know she has our interest. I don't know the Senate Early Learning K-12 chair is Senator Lisa Wellman. I don't know her. I don't know that name, but I would like to, the thing that I can see is something where we're giving, you can do a video or you can testify. I don't know that getting folks down to Olympia is tangible, but I think if we had something, and if you'd like me to find out more about what that means, I can talk to Marissa. But I think that's the only thing we're going to move the needle on this is we have to get some physical action. But I mean, I get excited about it, but I really would like to see, more than excitement, I want to see action. I want to see dollars behind it because I have a feeling that there's so many of us in the same situation, negotiating with our budget directors and thinking, how are we going to make this work next school year? So thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Next up, we'll hear from our board members. Do our student advisors want to share how final seats going?
It's going. Luckily, I only have 2 classes and 2 finals. I have math and history. Chugging along in running start. So that's all I have to share. Thank you.
All right. My week is also going. I have 4 finals. I finished one of them today, so 3 left. But to touch on the Martin Luther King Assembly, we had Erin Jones speak at ours, and she was captivating as always. And that assembly was, I believe, the first one where we haven't had anybody removed for disruption. So,
Celebration. No trash cans being thrown.
Oh, no.
That's impressive.
so that was it. That's all for me.
Thank you for sharing that. Good to do that. Director Knapp, would you like to share anything?
Not much. I mean, I really appreciate all the information shared tonight and our gifts, so thank you. And the mini treats out there was really good. And I appreciate the updates for the MLK from the schools, because I was like, what are they doing? I was wondering. So and then I will be there tomorrow at the budget community forum. So I'm excited to see her now.
Thank you. Director Kingman.
Thank you for the gifts and the recognition, appreciate that. And Dr. Sweeting, thank you for spending time with me today and in the future. I have nothing else to say.
Director Kelly, would you like to share anything else?
This is beautiful. Thank you. I am a huge fan of that sculpture. Love it. And local, I mean, great.
It's perfect.
That's wonderful. Just appreciate the appreciation and not too much, just chugging along. I'm going as well. I'm going. I've got a crew. I'm getting a little more firm with my kiddos in my kindergarten job. And I'm just saying, you know, you all had a pass last year, but not this year. Mrs. Kelly's back. And you're gonna be kindergarten. Because we're gonna do this together. So yeah, I have to get my mojo back. And it's hard after a hard year, but yeah, I'm claiming myself again. So that's kind of good. But anyway, all is good. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I wanted to say thank you to all of our staff members who assisted in the local search and rescue activity last week, and all the staff and teachers that go above and beyond, and all of our administrators that maybe were up all night long. And just a huge, big thank you for going the extra mile and doing the best that you can every day. We appreciate you, and glad we had a happy resolution. So thank you very much for all of your efforts for that. Our next meetings are February 6th. We have a special study session, and that is at 5 p.m. And then we have a regular board meeting on February 12th, right? Yes.
13th, she's like, you were on.
I didn't double check.
Yes, it's the school, yeah.
13th, it's the 13th, because the 12th is like.
Yes, it's
Christmas Day or
the, yeah,
something,
it's
right?
the 13th, it's the 6th and the 13th,
6th
yeah.
and 13th, because that math makes, that's good.
Yeah. 7 plus
Yeah. So we'll see you all back here, in February. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I second. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Madam Clerk.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Kingman. President in the back.
Aye.
Director Knapp. Aye.
Okay, meeting's adjourned. Have a great night. Drive safe.